Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone, depending on where you are, and welcome in today's session. I am Alba Kecha, the Account Manager for Risk and Management and the organizer of this webinar. Today we will discuss the topic of risk or opportunity. There are two sides to every coin. In this session, the presenter will discuss the following subjects. ISO 31000 defines risk as effect of uncertainty on objectives and an effect as a deviation from the expected positive and or negative, and yet the majority of organizations have an overwhelming focus on the negative. Why is this? Do organizations really understand the need to balance positive and negative? What do the new standards say about risk? How can organizations maximize their opportunities while still mitigating or controlling their risks? This topic will be presented by Mike Gray, a highly qualified vocational education trainer and assessor and a certified trainer for PECB, delivering training in ISO 9001 quality management, ISO 14001 environment, OHSAS 18001 health and safety, ISO 22000 food safety, etc. In order for all the audience to be part of discussions and ask your questions, please write down any questions you may have during the webinar in the chat box on your control panel. We will try to answer the majority of the questions in question and answer session and the remaining through email. Thank you for your attention and enjoy the webinar. Mike, the time is yours.
Lovely. Well, thank you, and thank you for all attending, all of you attendees wherever you are in the world. I think Alba covered most of this part, so I'll just keep going over it, but here you might not like to know where I am. That's us at the bottom of the world. Perth is where I am, is the most isolated continental capital. We're actually closer to Indonesia than we are to Sydney, which is not the capital of Australia, but we're 4,000 kilometres from our major capital. The area that I deal in, which is in Perth and the whole of Western Australia, which you'll see this whole area in here, we've got a population of 2 million people in there, and we have a metro area of 6,000 kilometres plus alone, and a huge state. Mostly mining, agriculture, all those areas. So risk is a big area for us, and as you can imagine, it's a big area that I have a great interest in. And one of the things that I was delighted to see when I saw the ISO standards start coming out, the new ones, ISO 9001, 14001, and so on, the new iterations of the whole focus in Section 6 on risk, and what I loved was seeing and opportunity, that they've actually, we're actually talking about opportunity. One of the things I think that we've failed to do worldwide is we all consider the risks and it's all doom and gloom. Seems to want to consider the opportunities, or to be seen to be actually dealing with the opportunities. And I know that sounds cynical, but the number of times I'll go and look at do audits in organisations, businesses, and when you get to their risk register, call it, opportunities registers, call it what you like, the whole thing is written in negative terms. And people, it seems to be the way of the world at the moment. Let's only look at the risk. I think we need to start looking at our opportunities. But a couple of things I would like to talk about, no, I won't talk about that, so we've done that. We've also looked at what we're going to look, so I'm not going to bore you with that. Let's move straight on to it. It's widely accepted among risk professionals that risk and opportunity aren't complete opposites. They're almost completely different coins, if you want to look at it from that point of view. And every coin has got two sides. Risk can be one coin, and you can have what many may perceive as a negative risk, others will perceive as having a positive side to it. Now, okay, let's be open and talk about gambling. Me, I don't gamble. It's just not something I want to do with my money. But other people will say, oh yes, but it might cost me $100 and I'm going to get $10,000 back. And look, it's a simple, that's a simple example, but it's a very true example. Opportunity is another side of the same, of a totally different coin. If you identify an opportunity and you work with that opportunity, and if you then take that opportunity and move forward, provided nothing changes, you've got a good chance of success. But unfortunately, the world's not a perfect place. And sometimes conditions change, and what was an opportunity now becomes a negative. And many of us would say, well, that's just risk. Well, yes, but maybe it isn't. I think maybe we need to start considering how we look at risk and how we look at opportunity. We maximize opportunities because we want to lead to a positive outcome. And I think that makes a lot of sense for everybody. But there is always a possibility of that negative outcome. And sometimes it's just about understanding how this whole thing fits together. In OHS, for instance, which is one of my specialities, I commonly hear people talking about the cost of safety. It's not about the terminology they're using, it's about cost. Oh, it's an expense to the business. And they never seem to want to talk about it's an investment in our people, it's an investment in our business, it's an investment in not, I guess, exceeding our compliance requirements. It's an investment in saving people's lives. If you take what you perceive as a risk and a loss to your business, look at it from the point of view of opportunity. Look at it from what's the cost to your business if you fail to comply? What's the cost to your business if you keep having accidents and incidents? How about we switch it round to an opportunity and say, if we take our management system, if we take our people, if we take our systems and we train people up and we actually follow those things that we said we're going to do, surely that's no longer a loss. It's not about a negative. It's now an opportunity to improve our business. And those are the things I really want to talk about. Think about what the real cost to business is if we can keep just talking and concentrating about risk and forget all about that whole world of opportunity, because it's happily sitting there. If we look at risk in the terms of upside and downside, then perhaps we get a bit of better clarity. Certainly in my view, that's the way we should go. If we look at major instances in workplaces, such as fire, major injury or massive equipment failures, it's pretty unlikely we're actually going to have any immediate upside, certainly not in the short term. But if on the other hand we invest in a major facility and equipment upgrade based on predicted upturns in our customer base and the product sales, then there may be a positive or there may be a negative outcome. The question we have to ask ourselves is, if we achieve what we actually forecasted, is that a position that's negative, or is that a position that's positive? Are we trying to say achieving the status quo is the way we should work in business, and certainly in risk and opportunity management? And of course, I personally don't hold to that idea. At Western Australia and across Australia at present, we have a massive downturn in our mining and construction. The first areas that most organisations have actually gone and made cuts in, and by the way, this does include government, major government departments, which scares me a lot, not a little, a lot. First areas for cuts: occupational health and safety and training. Now, yes, I run a training organisation. yes, I run an OHSAS organisation, and yes, I make a lot of my business is about auditing and supporting those areas, but this isn't sour grapes, it's just fact. I've heard plenty of people say, oh yeah, we've cut the occupational health and safety and training because that's discretionary spending. And I've usually sat there with my jaw on the ground going, you're kidding me. Why would we call occupational health and safety and training discretionary spending? And this is coming from organisations that also want us to certify them, or are already certified, or have requirements for competence and training and ensuring under the Occupational Health and Safety Acts that they protect their people from injury and so on. And I often say to them, okay, if you think that's discretionary spending, which part do you think we should miss out? We have to start looking at, stop focusing on the negatives. Let's focus on the opportunities at hand. If there's a downturn, maybe it's now the time to improve our systems. Spend that time when we haven't had time, we're so busy, to go back over our systems and review them. Conduct some training. Get all the training that we didn't do, and when they've been audited, oh yeah, we've been trying to train people, but we're too busy. Well, now that you're not, now's the time to do those things and improve the company's position. So when things do come to an upturn, you're suddenly in a position to say, well, we have invested into our occupational health and safety, we have invested in our environmental management, we have invested in our quality, and we've improved it. And we've made that investment as part of the opportunity to build a greater business and a better business, instead of the doom and gloom aspect of, oh, we're all going to fail, so what's the point of trying? And I hate to tell you this, but that's what I see a lot of the time. You know, if we actually achieve the exact predicted increase and improvements, we have to look at it. Is that really an upside? I drive myself mad talking about this one and trying to get an answer, and I get lots of different answers. If there's only an upside, really, if we've actually achieved a greater than expected improvement in our business and we exceed our targets, otherwise, we've just really achieved our status quo. And I think, unfortunately, this is an area of risk and opportunity management where we have a tendency to go, oh, we're comfortable with that, so let's stay with that. Let's not move forward. We'll sit with this nice, comfortable aspect. See, I don't hold to say there's no, you know, we should never take risk. Of course we should take risks, because if we didn't take risks, man wouldn't have walked on the moon. And a lot of things would never have been achieved. You know, if we achieve project production targets in quality and finance, but our costs increase unexpectedly, as has happened in Australia because of the dollar and many other situations, and the reduction in iron ore prices and so on, you'd have to look at it and say that was considered a downside. And yet, the whole reason for building all the additional mines 4 or 5 years ago was because there was that opportunity that was recognised. Unfortunately, nobody foresaw the downturns. We think about it from the point of view of OHSAS. In incidents and accidents, as a result of unfamiliarity with new facilities and equipment, it can be a downside. You know, people start getting hurt, even though we've built all this equipment, we've improved it, but we failed to train people. We didn't take that next step. We didn't recognise it as an opportunity, and we probably didn't recognise it as a risk, to be honest. You know, if we find as a result of increased production we've got greater purchasing power with reduced costs, then great, you've got an upside. But think about this one. If we actively reduce accidents and incidents, reduce our environmental impacts, we actually may find that we've reduced our costs actively from all those support things, because we're getting greater productivity. We've certainly reduced our unforeseen costs, the ones that we didn't think about when we had somebody badly injured or worse killed, or we've damaged the environment and suddenly we're paying all sorts of per diems to the Environmental Protection Agency just to mitigate and manage the system. Now, we start seeing stable and better and increased productivity, and all of a sudden our business is looking a damn sight better than the ones that we're all standing around going, oh yes, look, we'll just stop doing the training, we'll stop doing all of the health and safety stuff. To us, it's a burden. You know, when I look at and read people's risk registers, and I'm sure there's many of you who'll be nodding out there going, yep, I've seen this. It's all about the negatives. Typically, it'll be, you know, damage to our reputation, negative feedback from stakeholders, increased investigations as a result of accidents and incidents, increased complaints as a result of product failure delays, etc., increase in workplace injuries, escalation in our insurance claims as a result of incidents and failures and so on, additional management burden, increased environmental exposures, failure for us retaining staff. Now, all of those scenarios that I've got there are actually taken out of a number of fairly large organisations' risk registers. And notice I said risk registers, okay? Because when we're looking at that, they've looked at it just purely and solely from the downside. They've looked at it solely from the side, oh, what's it going to do to our business? Let's have a look at some of the examples. They've recognised damage to their reputation and negative feedback from stakeholders. And I can tell you now, every time you go and see that, it'll be all sorts of reactive processes to fix what's come back from their stakeholders and from their reputation. And they focus absolutely on limiting the damage and turning the feedback around. But you know something, I have to say, if the organisation's already identified that that's a risk, then wouldn't it have been smarter to focus on ensuring that they prevented the situation from occurring in the first place? Wasn't there an opportunity that they've completely missed, instead of saying, oh, we'll just come up with some focus, some areas for fixing this, if they just sat and gone, you know, so where's the opportunity in this? Where can we improve our business so we no longer get the negative feedback? What can we do to reduce any chance of damage to our reputation? Have we actually got the strongest systems? Have we actually got the best processes in place? Have we actually thought about how can we get this business to manage its opportunities? And by managing the opportunities, we're also managing our risks, but we're doing it in a different focus. We're doing it in a positive way. It's no longer doom and gloom. It's about, let's build this business, let's lift our sights, let's actually move forward from this just focusing on risk, and let's move to where the opportunity lies within what we're trying to do. You know, often I'll see things about increase in work injuries, and usually there'll be a whole section of the risk management system or the risk register, and it'll have scenarios such as increased investigations as a result of accidents and incidents, escalation in insurance claims, additional management burden as a result of return to work requirements for injured persons, and it's endless. And I look at it and go, you're saying that your risks are all these things that you would have to do if you've allowed this to occur. You know, where's their focus? Is their focus really on the upside, or are they focusing on the downside? What's the language of their scenarios? What's the language of their risk register? Okay? It's leading to reactive focuses on controls and mitigation and proactive opportunities to prevention and improvement. They're missing that whole bit about how about we focus on, if we reduce the number of injuries, one, we'll have a lot happier people, so we'll have a greater retention. if we no longer have the accidents, we no longer have lots of downtime investigating them, having equipment, plant, sites shut down whilst these things are investigated and then actions put in place. Surely it would have been wiser and smarter. What's the opportunity in this business or this project or this construction task for us to build an opportunity for better OHS, better environmental management, better quality management? You know, I mean, have a look at all, as I've said, you know, look at other relations, relate them to yourselves, to accidents and injuries, and major focus is always on the increased failures of accidents and incidents resulting in increased cost of business. Yeah. Oh yes, I'll hear people say, but increased cost of business is the important part of it. No, it's not. To me, it's those injured people, their families, and the people parts of this are the most important part of the business, because eventually the organisation will run out of people. The opportunity is to be able to say, let's change our focus, let's change our language. Okay. We need to stop this focus of negativity, always looking at the negative and reactive. The latest standards, as I've said, I think they're brilliant because they talk, section 6 is all about risk and, in big letters, opportunity. You know, now's the time for us to all start considering our approach and maybe getting organisations to reconsider the way they're approaching risk, and the way, maybe turn around and say, hey, how about opportunity, looking at your opportunities, and whilst we're doing that, we don't ignore risks, but let's see if we can use the risk identification process to improve and build on an improved opportunity focus. Get them to look at the opportunity for improvement in any situation where your risk is identified and defined. By all means, use the process, but ask them to look at conducting thorough examination, good forensic identification of what actually is involved. Define the risk in light of the opportunity for improvement. Yeah. Ensure not only is the incident prevented, but measures are in place to ensure that the risks doesn't develop again in a repetitious cycle. I mean, I'm sure there's plenty of you out there who've seen the same risk, or worse still, the same incident and accident in people's registers, and it's the same thing over and over and over again. Now, as an Australian, we have a great saying, and I'm sure there's an equivalent one around the rest of the world, which is, what part of using the same fire and the same flour to make the same piece of damper and not expecting it to taste any better, don't we understand? You know, we need people to start looking upon risks in a way more professional and complete way. They need to be seeking out the opportunity for improvement. Change the focus. Think about, what can we do to make this business better? What can we do to increase and improve our focus on health and safety, environment, quality, risk management, opportunity management as a whole? How do we get that to work? Perhaps with the introduction of the new standards, this is the time for refocusing. Let's get a holistic view of risks. I think I deliberately titled this presentation, "There are two sides to every coin." And that's the whole point. It's not a balancing act. Avoid the trap in this whole balancing act. Well, we've got one coin, we've got risk on one side, opportunity on the other. Well, that's just blatantly doesn't happen. Opportunity has got two sides, risk has two sides. And I actually thought of it today, and I thought, you know something, just occasionally they've got an edge too. And usually getting hit by the edge of something is not a good idea. The significant risks, seriously, just going back, avoiding this whole thing about balancing out the significant risk of accident or incident with serious consequence is often balanced against an opportunity not to have the incident or the accident. I've seen that time and time again. When I've said to people, well, what's your opportunity here? Oh, not having an incident or the accident. Which one? Oh, this one. But you've already had it. Oh, yes, but we've got an opportunity not to have that one again. Okay. Well, what else can you put in there as part of the opportunity? We have to start thinking about it. Avoid describing our scenarios in purely negative terminology. Rather, we might consider terms, which I love this one, variations in or change to. And you can apply that particular term whether you're looking at quality, security, safety, environment, variation in conditions, changes to personnel, changes to operational status. Each one of those, think about it, change management is usually, not always, brought about because of somebody recognised an opportunity for improvement. That should be the starting point. We've got an opportunity here. How can we build on that? Let's change the language. If we change our language, we can encourage people to think about maximising opportunities rather than just focusing on or avoiding the downsides. I harp on it, but I'm sorry, this is something I see so often. It's all about negative, and yet I go outside each day and the sun's shining and we're all, the world's not a bad place to be in at any time. Even in the present climate, it is a pretty nice place to be in. But we don't talk about our opportunities. We all seem to focus purely and solely on the negatives. And I think we need to change. The concept of risk and opportunity isn't new. But as I said, perhaps we've allowed this risk to overshadow opportunity. We're so hell-bent on everybody saying, we're forced into OSH. Well, and I do hear that one a lot. We're forced into compliance. Well, no, you're not forced into it. A good business person actually treasures the people who work for them. They treasure their business. They treasure their environment. So surely the focus should be on, let's actually overshadow the risks with opportunities. Let's consider each risk identified as an opportunity to improve our business instead of just on what's the quickest and easiest and cheapest way of overcoming it. Let's think about it in a holistic fashion. Don't ignore downsides, far from it. I don't want to get people to think that I'm advocating a fair, beautiful, fairy world where nothing goes wrong. I hate to tell you this, been around far too long, worked in mining, been involved in some fairly major incidents over the years. But I've also learned from those incidents. I've actually been able to take things away because we were given the opportunity to actually forensically identify what went wrong, how can we improve it, and we were allowed to do that, not just to stop it, but actually take it to the next level of how can we make sure this never ever happens to another miner ever again. Okay, and it lets us build robust management systems. Let's build on what we've got. But don't focus only on the upside either. We need a balanced view. And in my view, we've got to really understand the true context of our risks and opportunities. And that may dramatically change depending on where you are in the world, what the business focus is. Each one of us, each one of our organisations, the context is different. We have to look at it from our own business. I have a small, relatively small training organisation. Certainly I'm not the size of some of the major colleges around the world, but we look at their opportunities. We want to grow, we want to improve, but we're also taking a balanced view of that and saying, well, yes, but if I take on 500 more students, I don't have the people and we don't have the support systems. We're not going to do it yet. We will take them on a small pieces at a time. We will make sure that we don't fall into the traps of other organisations. We've actually had gone back and looked at what's happened to them and said, no, we won't do that. You know, in closing, I go back to something that I live by all the time. And this is Michelangelo's words, because I don't think anybody could have said it better when it comes to risk and opportunity. The greatest danger for most of us lies not in that we set our aim too high and we're falling short, it's in setting our aim too low and achieving our mark. And I love the next bit. I saw the angel of the marble and I carved until I set him free. Now you can apply that to risk and opportunity day in and day out. You know, let's lift our focus. Let's look for the opportunities. Let's look for the angels in the marble. Let's see if we can actually build opportunity, identify it, work with it to reduce our risk, not to reduce our risk focus, but to reduce the negatives. I would love to see the whole thing turn around and say, let's just not use the term risk. It's got so many negative connotations. Let's just call everything an opportunity. Sadly, that's not going to happen, and for a lot of reasons, and I think really we shouldn't be moving it, but I'd love to see it. Let's just talk about where's our opportunities every day. How can we improve? What can we do? And is this organisation that we're dealing with actually focusing on making their systems better, managing the risks, managing out the negatives, working towards improved safety, so we get that terminology of the positive terminology. So for what it's worth, that's certainly my view of risk and opportunity. As I've said, I seriously believe that the new standards are going to be of great benefit because they will lift that focus. So thank you all very much for your time. I'm happy to take any questions. So away we go.
Thank you, Mike. I would like to ask the audience to ask your questions now. In the meantime, I will start with the first question. In your introductory statement, you indicated that most of the risk registers are written in a negative form. Could you kindly explain what you meant by this?
Sure. Okay, certainly, and this may not be, and obviously I have to preface this by saying this is an Australian experience, but some registers that I've dealt with certainly recently, everything in the register talked about, for instance, height safety, and then it looked at scenario, fall from height, person injured whilst working, gravitation, the other one they're using now is gravitational people, and I challenged that. They said, oh, the person fell. They're talking about spills, and it's all about the negative impacts, which I understand, but there's nothing about, prior to that, looking at the opportunity and saying spill avoidance, looking at what we put in place first. It's all about the outcomes. The scenarios talk in a purely negative outcome. Nobody seems to put in, for instance, if we look at spills will be a good one actually. Good control of spills leading to reduced environmental impacts. What's wrong with that as an entry in a risk register? You can then say we've considered the scenarios of spills, we've considered the scenarios of what happens if our stuff ends up in waterways, but we've thought about these in a forensic fashion and we've put those in a positive way. We are going to put these controls in place in order to ensure it doesn't happen before it happens. A lot of risk registers that I see are reactive. Entries appear in them when I say, oh, how come you put that in? No, we had the accident last week. Where if they'd actually thought about it and gone about looking at the risk register from the point of opportunity, they may well have actually identified that beforehand. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much for your answer. Now we will continue with the second questions. The question is, what role the price or cost play in the process of risk management? What things we should focus while drafting our risk treatment plans?
Yeah. Look, you've got to take into account cost, etc. I mean, it's just, it would be crazy not to consider cost. And certainly in Australia, all about legislation for the control of occupational health and safety, environmental and management talks about ensuring as keeping your risks and treating them as low as, keeping it as low as is reasonably practicable, right? So that your controls should meet the test of reasonably practicable. In other words, ordinary man test. Is your organisation doing everything that it should do to meet that? We're not asking people to spend lots and lots of money. What we're saying is you consider, in the light of what are you required to do? If there's two different, say, pieces of machinery protection equipment, machine guarding, one of them's $500, meets the required standards, does the job. So the local engineer puts that on his equipment. A mining company might look at the same piece of equipment and go, oh yes, well there's another one for $5,000. Does the same job, but we're in a different work environment, so we think we should probably go with that dearer one. That's fine too. But don't, which I do see a lot, don't have the mining company then saying to the other guy, oh, you've got to put one on as well. No, is he meeting the standard? Are you meeting the requirements of legislation? Then certainly. But you've also got to look at the cost of training, etc. The standards talk about the requirements for competence and training. Just saving money by not spending it is actually damaging your business, because eventually people's competence runs out and they lose that competence. And I think cost, yes, it's fair to do cost analysis, and in fact it's crazy business not to, but you need to do it in the light of a reasonably practicable solution. And sometimes, it's not that expensive. A lot of the time the business has got its own people and own support. They just haven't recognised it.
Thank you, Mike, very much for this answer. Because of the time limit, we will be answering all the questions throughout email. I want to thank all the attendees as well who have joined us today. I hope you have all learned something new today and your questions have been answered. I also want to inform you that this webinar is recorded and can be found on our YouTube channel. The link of the webinar will be sent to you in the following days. Don't forget to check back on our upcoming webinars and topics of your interest by visiting our website www.pecb.com. Looking forward to seeing you all next week in a topic of selecting the appropriate risk assessment techniques. Until then, have a great week. Thank you.